Oh, sorry. Don't have mics for the recording of the video, so in between it doesn't really amplify it, just for recording.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Can you sit here? That's good. Just for you. Did you want to say I'm sorry. Don't hold it off.
Okay, so we have time for questions. I'm going to get started. If anyone else wants to, they can just join us later. So welcome to our session. My name is Jessica Frank, and I am the program coordinator for the Center for Access to Justice and Technology at Chicago Kent. With me today is Brian Donnelly. He is a professor at Columbia Law School. William Mueller is a student at the University of Miami's Law School, and Alex Ravenel works with me in my office as our Access to Justice Fellow. So today's discussion is about the A2J clinical project, what we've been working on for the last 2 years. Now the computer. Sorry. All right, well, why it's warming, or why it's coming back. I can give you a little bit of background about our topic today. So in the LSC, the Legal Services Corporation, created the Technology Initiative Grant Program over a decade ago to facilitate a solution to a problem. So the problem is that 80% of the poor and working poor in the US face their legal problems without the assistance of attorneys. The solution, facilitated by these TIG grants, is for the creation of statewide legal aid websites. So there's one point of access in each state that has legitimate legal information and advice on it, and document assembly, and other smart tools for helping pro se litigants out there. Just last year, LSC released their Summit on the Use of Technology to expand access to justice, which seeks to, and I'm quoting here, explore the potential of technology to move the United States towards providing service of some form to 100% of persons without a legal need. So it's kind of a mind shift. Instead of the idea of giving 100% of an actual lawyer sitting there helping a small percentage of people, the idea is to give 100% of people some range of service. So A2J author, A2J author was a software tool created by Cali and Chicago Kent to address document assembly. Before A2J author, documents, if you're a lawyer, if you've seen court forms, they're messy, they're complicated, even lawyers can't really understand what's going on there. A2J author was created to be a friendly front end to document assembly. It has, it's interactive. It has a guide avatar, it has an end user avatar. They walk the pathway to justice, to the courthouse. The final document is produced. It's kind of like TurboTax for court forms. So if you've ever used TurboTax to prepare your own personal taxes, it asks one piece of information at a time. The main use of A2J author is document assembly. The A2J author guided interview, that's what they're called, gathers information from the end user. It stores that information in variables. Those variables are stored in an answer file. And that answer file then is sent to the national server, which 38 legal aid organizations across the country, Guam, Puerto Rico, there's 4 Canadian courts that are using us, Canadian legal aids. They all send it to the national server. The national server assembles the document, and the end user, it gets their document. Thank you. We'll just wait a second, we'll skip ahead to the slides then. All right, never mind. It's apparently this PowerPoint. Okay. The end user never sees any of this kind of behind the scenes work. So all the end user sees is the guided interview asking them questions. They click the button that says get my document, and out pops their document. So here, thank you. So here is the questions for the end user. So they're seeing it with the guide avatar. It's being stored in the variables in the middle. The variables then hold the information in an answer file. It's sent to the national server, and out pops the information in the form itself. Oops, sorry. So there are a couple other uses for A2J author. It's beyond document assembly. It's used for online intake. So a couple legal aid organizations use it instead of having someone have to sit on the phone and answer basic questions about themselves to see if they qualify. They can go online, fill out this information, and then it's entered into the case management system. Triage and e-filing. So the last example of e-filing, it's currently being piloted in 4 federal courts, 2 in Missouri, 1 in Wisconsin, and 1 in Florida. So in the past 7 years, we've seen 2 million usages of A2J author on the national server. In 2013, we had 500,000 usages just in 2013. But as you can see from the graph, in the last 4 years, we've kind of been leveling off. So we had a really dramatic sweep between 2008 and 2012, 2011, and then it started to kind of peter off. Part of what we're seeing is that along that same time, funding for legal services was cut. When they don't have the funding, even for basic attorney representation, they cut their technology staff as well. So there aren't as many legal aid attorneys and staff to build these document assembly projects. So out of this grew the idea for the A2J clinical project. The project is based on a course taught by my boss, Ron Stout, at Chicago Kent, called the Justice and Technology Practicum. The Practicum teaches law students how to actually use the software. So law students are already tech savvy, as we all know, and so they already have a jump on legal aid attorneys who are 10 to 15 years older than them learning the software. They get it. So it teaches them the software. They also spend 20 hours in the first 3 weeks in the field working and observing pro se litigants. So it's not just the software. It's the whole package behind why do pro ses need this kind of form? What kind of help would be available for them? What's needed? How to speak to them? That kind of thing. In the past 4 years, the Chicago-Kent students have worked with legal aids across the country, making document assembly packages for Nebraska, like an answer and counterclaim for divorce, a petition for expungement in Pennsylvania, a name change in Minnesota, North Carolina's simple uncontested divorce. And we partner very closely with Illinois because we're based in Illinois, and Illinois Legal Aid Online is one of our partners. But so we have a lot of Illinois that interviews. So this project was expanded in 2012 under another TIG grant, Technology Initiative Grant, to form the A2J clinical project. So in the A2J clinical project, we recruited 6 law schools to join us and be our pilot schools in round 1. So in the fall of this year, we had the Practicum at Chicago-Kent. We had Brian's Lawyering in the Digital Age Clinic, CUNY's Elder Law Clinic, and Becoming a Professional at the University of North Carolina. This spring, our A2J clinic partners were Georgetown with the Technology Initiative and Legal Practice class, Concordia University, brand new law school. Their very first clinic was an A2J clinic. And then Williams University of Miami Health and Elder Law Medical Legal Partnership. Out of these pilot schools, we've kind of seen that there are 3 models that the A2J clinic can fit into. So we have traditional clinics, standard, like the elder law clinic. They take clients, they handle cases, they go to court, and then the students work on an A2J guided interview. We have a hybrid course, which is kind of like the Justice and Technology Practicum at Chicago-Kent. There's the field observations, some working with clients or observing the population, and then working on the software. The final model is a professionalism course. So professional responsibility, kind of like Judith Wagner's course at University of North Carolina, where part of being a lawyer or being a good lawyer is knowing software. It's knowing about technology and law practice, and having kind of the pro bono, you should help people who can't help themselves kind of attitude. So here is that simple uncontested divorce that I mentioned 2 of our students made. This was made 2 years ago at Chicago-Kent. It is 28 questions long. 2 students worked on it together. There are they go through step by step and explain the legalese. So what does living separate and apart mean in North Carolina? You have to check a box. Have you lived separate and apart for 2 years? What does that mean? Does it mean he moved out? Does it mean, we sort of lived together back and forth, we moved back in and out? So they had to explain what that meant to the pro ses. There's advanced logic to test that. So can someone even use this form? So instead of asking someone, what's your birth date? And then are you 18? Because you have to be 18 to at least use this form. They instead use that birth date and calculate whether or not they're 18 or not. So it saves the end user that one question. And there's more advanced logic in it. But it's the final document produced. So on the right is the hot docs that actually comes out. It's 9 pages long. It has the cover sheet, it has the complaint, the civil summons, the certificate of service, and the judgment, the order for divorce. So it contains everything you would need to get divorced with no children, uncontested in North Carolina. William will talk a little bit more about the student reaction to this, but from what we've seen, students love this course. And it's completely different from anything that they've seen. So it's a unique blend of big ideas and technical skills, completely different from any law school course I've ever taken. Never done programming, and it was actually fun to learn. They enjoyed seeing how to channel advocacy passion into practical, here's something that's actually going to help an end user. And it challenged their beliefs about the role of lawyers and what lawyers are good for and what maybe can be done, lawyers aren't needed. So part of the project was creating new training resources. So the training resources were created in order to facilitate faculty who might not be strong in technical skills and that don't know the software, and to kind of give them a virtual TA. So I created the A2J author training materials and another guy that works with me at Illinois Legal Aid Online, Chris, created the Hot Docs training materials. They're available at a2jclinic.classcaster.net/training materials. First part of that URL has all of our materials on the clinic to date, so feel free to visit that link. They're all posted on our YouTube channel as well. So we have 40 plus videos on everything you need to know about the software for students to create it. So they have videos that they can go back to if their faculty isn't necessarily strong on the software tools. I also did virtual TA sessions. So like William's class at Miami, I did a TA session with them every week with GoToMeeting, and we turned out a successful product. And then finally, working with our law students from the legal aid perspective is actually fairly easy. They send in a request to me, and I pull all those different projects that they want done from legal aids across the country, send them out to the different clinics if they're interested in using it. In the legal aid side of it, they have to work with our student maybe 5 phone calls, 5 emails. It's pretty low key in terms of what they have to give, but the legal aid provides that kind of heuristics, that rule of thumb. You have to file on Thursdays. Don't take it to judge, whatever. Make sure you have 14 copies because they don't let you copy at the courthouse. All that kind of information that the legal aid has can be built in to the software as well. I'm going to turn it over to Brian, and we're going to take questions at the end. So if you have any quick questions, though, we're good. Okay.
Hi. I'm Brian Donnelly, and I co-teach the Lawyering in the Digital Age Clinic at Columbia Law School. There are 2 other faculty in the clinic, Professors Conrad Johnson and Mary Zulak, and what you're going to see today is really an embodiment of what Mary wanted to have presented today, and I'm really here to help make that happen. Conrad Johnson and Mary Zulak were legal aid attorneys who then became a part of the clinical faculty at Columbia and started clinic based on litigation for racial discrimination. And in the 1990s, I was at Columbia doing administrative work and teamed up with them trying to teach students, sort of how to work with computers back in the early 90s when computers were kind of novel. And we've figured out somewhere around the year 2000 that what we really need to do is have a clinic focused on technology, not technology sort of in the periphery, but really at the core of what it is that we teach. And so we started this clinic in 2001. Our involvement with the A2J project really predates the clinical initiative by a few years. We had a collaboration with Judge Fern Fisher, who at the time was the head of the civil court in New York City, and then within that is also the housing court. And so we, let's see, let me get a couple slides up here. So we helped to create in the A2J interview a tenant answer for non-payment cases. This is in New York City, right? We created the A2J interview for people who are not represented in eviction cases so that they could actually file an answer, and then a related interview about how to vacate a default. In other words, if you have a default judgment in an eviction case, you can put in an affidavit to the court, and so this is something we've been involved with. And Fern Fisher, the judge we work with, is now in a different administrative position in the courts, but is still very enthusiastic about the potential for using A2J interviews in the New York State court system. We started with the clinical project. I mean, this is, I think, we wanted to support the idea that clinics should be working with technology, and that there's a lot of good that can happen when students put their efforts towards authoring these tools using A2J Author for lots of different good reasons. And we just to make the disclosure that it wasn't all all that simple and easy, and working with this program presents a number of challenges, and particularly the way we wanted to use it in the particular instance I'm going to talk about. the fact that Hot Docs just works on Windows is a problem, right? The world, in particular the world we live in with students and educators, is not a Windows world. And so you have to somehow bridge that gap. And also, because we were working with confidential student information, the idea of putting it up on the LHI server wasn't something that we were really willing to do in terms of client confidentiality. So those are things that we had to try to overcome. Moving the answer file over to Hot Docs manually isn't the easiest thing, but the good news is that I think John's going to talk about this tomorrow, or is it tomorrow? Yeah, that there is a new version coming out at some point, and I think when we are living in that world, I think it's going to really increase the utility of this project. Yeah, it will be a game changer. I mean, you saw the slide with how many interviews are already being used, and it's it has its own validity and utility. But I think once this happens, where we have document assembly and everything all together, it's going to be great. So stay tuned. The project that we worked on over the last 2 semesters or so in my clinic was. Well, actually, we'll talk about the context for a minute. So we work with lots of different clients over the last X number of years, since 2001. It's a 1-semester clinic, so do the math. We've had lots of different relationships with legal aid, legal services organizations, various judges, the administrative judges, you name it. We work with lots of different parts of the sort of the judicial system and legal system generally. There are a couple of instances here where we've used other tools. There's a tool that we created with WordPress with something called Contact Form 7 that students work with, which gives us this sort of document assembly kind of interactivity through the web in a way that the A2J does. And that worked out pretty well for us. There are 2 other examples of working with administrative law judges where we put information up on the web, just to make what is often very obscure and obtuse to people who are trying to represent themselves, just give them more information about particular issues in New York City administrative law. So those are a couple of other examples that we're doing similar things, but not with the A2J software per se, but they have similar objectives. But the objective we had in the project that we created the A2J interview for was to try to work on this prison to pipeline problem. In other words, students who are in a particular public school in New York City and wind up in disciplinary situations are so many times more likely to end up as a result of this, missing school and becoming part of the prison system rather than being in school. And so here's a screenshot from CNN that it's trying to make the point from the Justice Department that it's an important problem. And at the mid-year meeting 2014 at ABA, there was an article that was written. Here's a quote from this article. 70% of students involved in school-related arrests are referred to law enforcement or Black and Latino. I mean, this is a real problem. And so we've been working with, and so Mary asked the question. This is Mary's question, right? And I think Conrad discussed this with her as well. And the idea is that with this particular problem, the school to prison pipeline, that we thought we could actually do something about this. And so we have a relationship with the Renaissance Charter High School for Innovation in East Harlem. And the person who runs that school is someone who we've worked with on other community development projects for years. And he left legal aid and is now trying to manage the school. And so we've been helping him with a number of different projects. And he came to us with a desire to try to work out ways to manage discipline within the school. There are roughly a third of the students are special ed, and the special ed students really require a particular attention when it comes to these disciplinary problems. we were thinking that what we can try to do is and analyze the law, which I'll show you in a second, and then come up with a framework for it. And so this is Conrad's idea of rather than putting an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, we'll put a fence at the top of the cliff, right? And so that's our way of illustrating that idea. And so this is an illustration of the legal framework in which Steve Fallarif, who's running the school, was trying to figure out, well, how is it that we're really going to enforce discipline in a proper way, right? As a lawyer, he looked at the problem and saw that, it's important to follow the procedures when it comes to these, particular incidents, especially with students who have special ed programs designed for them, right? And a big question in determining what to do is whether or not the particular incident is a manifestation of the disability that the special ed student has. And so you have to determine this in a certain context, right? And a big piece of this, and Mary and I went over to the school with our team and spoke to the people who work with the students and enforce the discipline. And a big part of it is that getting the notice out, getting the parents involved really early on in this and not letting these things get delayed is an important thing, because what happens if a student gets suspended, they're out of school for a very long time, then this is a compounding problem, right? And so we're trying to get the whole process working in a way that can be handled, using document assembly. And so these are the design considerations that we're thinking about. And so when we created the interview, we sort of started at step one. There's a document that comes out about notice of exclusion, that if there's a particular incident, a student is being excluded from school pending what other disciplinary actions are going to happen, what other procedures are going to happen. We have to get that out right away, right? Because we don't want the week to go by, that kind of thing. And then the interview helps them step through each of these parts of the process, and ultimately going through the hearing so that the due process within the hearing is actually documented and everyone can actually see as a record of what happened in the hearing. So it's a complete framework for the disciplinary process, from the initial notice to all the way to the end. And so here, I have a few screenshots here of what the interview looks like and what the students are trying to do. When there's a particular infraction, that infraction relates to the code of conduct within the school, right? If there's a problem that arises, they look at the code of conduct, and then you can choose from the list of different infractions, and also on the right here, other alternative penalties if there's a particular penalty that might be given out in a particular situation. Oops, here we go. And so here are sections of the code of conduct, and it goes on because there are quite a few sections. You can sort of check off which violation of the code of conduct applies in a particular situation. And so then what happens is there are three different forms that come out of this system in document assembly. There's a notice of exclusion, the first step. There's a notice of suspension and the setting of the hearing date, so that parents know that they have to come to the school and they have to work this out through a hearing. And then the most complicated document is the hearing decision itself. After the hearing is actually constructed here with all this information, this document will go out to the parents, and there's a record of what happens. And so, it became a little bit complicated to put this together in terms of, the different violations of the code of conduct that then show up at the end of the notice of the hearing decision. And so, the bottom line is that we're setting this framework for compliance with, the code of conduct and the rules that apply to, particularly with disabled students, and trying to come up with ways that as they go through this process that they could actually manage, outcomes that are more beneficial to the student and are able to, keep students in school, right? Not keep students, sort of on this, constant treadmill of being excluded from school, but keep them in the school and work through the problems, in a much more positive way, rather than just saying, okay, you're suspended, that's it, right? And so it's it's hopefully a cycle that is, going to help a lot of students, stay in school rather than not. So there you go.
Hello. So, as Jessica mentioned, my name is William. I'm from the University of Miami. I'm a rising 3L now, and this past year I was part of our medical legal partnership health rights clinic, and it's been a long-standing clinic since 2003. I think it's been run, and so I'm going to give you guys a quick overview of how it's run, what we do, to see then how we kind of implemented access to justice within that framework. And so like I mentioned, it's a medical legal partnership. We team up with the University of Miami Med School campus and team up with residents and fellows to kind of help diagnose not just low-income minority medical problems, but diagnose their legal problems, which they may or may not be aware of. So we mainly handle a lot of Social Security cases, a lot of public benefits, food stamps. We go in front of ALJ judges and have hearings if the process of the clients reaches that step. We also do a lot of advanced directives, living wills, preemie guardianships, which is the focus of our Access to Justice interview. I'll go over that a little bit more in a second. We handle a lot of immigration. As you can imagine, in Miami, the minorities are really the majority, if you've ever been there for a couple minutes. So we do a lot of immigration and a lot of veteran benefits, and that's spiked up recently in the last year. So just to give you guys a quick profile of our clinic, there's two professors who are attorneys, Janelle Newman and Melissa Swain, and we have two VA fellows now, and they handle almost exclusively veteran cases. We had 14 law students working the past year. We had about 400 cases. We worked with 16 medical residents from Med School. And total cases should read total naturalizations that we kind of ushered in this past year. And like I mentioned, we've been running since 2003. And so spring semester, it's a year-long clinical program. And so spring semester, Janelle Newman and Melissa Swain kind of approached our clinical group with 3 public policy programs that they wanted to get up and running. And one of those was Access to Justice. So they, I think Jessica actually kind of gave us this introductory presentation, and this is the clinical group, and five of us, I believe, directly tackled the Access to Justice public policy program, and then the rest of the students kind of just provided some assistance throughout that process. And so we started around February of this year, and worked through May. And the group, the 5 members, collaborated every 2 weeks or so, and we had weekly TA sessions with Jessica, which were very helpful. And we divvied up assignments. I'll go over a few of the things that we did to kind of make the A2J process easier for us. And I guess I'll highlight student reactions, because I'm sure that's what you may be most interested in. And then we finished the project with a presentation to our law school dean, who sat in and watched us do a similar presentation to what I'm doing now. And so when we first started tackling A2J, we wanted to kind of identify the ideal form to use. We knew that the technology, the hurdle to understand the technology might be a little high, so we wanted to start with a pretty basic form. And so we identified the preemie guardianship forms that we routinely fill out for clients and help them file. So preemie guardianship, in case you're unaware, is just you're essentially filing a petition with the court with the probate court of that state to select a specific guardian in case you become incapacitated or deported, which is kind of the case for a lot of our clients. Or you could do that for your children. So if you were to become incapacitated and you have sole custody of your child, then you could appoint a specific guardian and kind of bypass the probate rules of the state. And so this was our form, how it looked before we started the Access to Justice program. It changed to kind of fit the needs and the demands of access to justice. But I think it's better now than when we originally had it. And so of course we started with legal research to make sure that our current form was compliant with the law. Luckily most of it was, but more than that, we wanted to create a kind of all-encompassing interview for our clients. When you're sitting face-to-face with a client, you can ask a lot of questions that kind of excludes them or excludes possible guardians from being appointed in the form. For instance, if a child guardian had been convicted of child abuse, they were not allowed to be a guardian. And so that's something you can quickly identify in a face-to-face interview, but that's kind of something that you need to really put forward in a unilateral interview, such as A2J. Make sure that you're kicking out guardians or users that are not compliant with the law. And so we started off pretty old school. We started with a poster board and a decision tree. We had seen in the kind of introductory presentation that a decision tree was, you see it as you're doing A2J. It's next to your questions. So we thought if we could just make a kind of a hard copy of that decision tree and kind of set up the initial framework, it would kind of help us transition easier and faster into the actual programming of A2J. And I would say it was pretty helpful. A lot of students were referring back to this whenever we were designing the interview questions. And overall, I'll show you the final product now. I think it was a pretty good success. We finished the interview, and we ended up with 3 separate forms. For parents that have sole custody of their children, for 2 parents that share custody, and if you're filling out the guardianship forms for yourself. And I think overall the 5 team members really appreciated the project and felt that it was pretty unique and rewarding altogether. So I'll highlight some of the important things that I thought was that it brings a unique skill sets together. As I mentioned, there was legal research, then there's a bit of programming, consulting, we had to pitch it to legal services, so there's kind of like that face-to-face interaction. Some people may be better at than others. And it really compelled group interaction. Really outside of study groups, there's not that much interaction between students in law school outside of social life. So this is really something that they had to work on. Essentially under the mantra that you're going to get a grade for this, so everyone's trying really hard and putting their best foot forward in order to get it done. And that kind of also compelled teamwork. Everyone wanted to see this project done. Everyone wanted to see it through all the phases of the project, and that was nice. Also, it helped with work management. So as I mentioned, each student had about 10, 11 cases as part of our clinic, and those cases didn't go away. So from fall semester, where we dedicated ourselves solely to those 10, 11 clients, now we had those same clients or a different set of clients, but now we had this public policy access to justice project as well. So finding time to incorporate that often on the weekends, luckily the weekly sessions were very useful because they set us up at the same time every week. And delegating duties to other students and kind of everyone buying in to this goal, this ultimate goal of getting this interview done. And of course, as far as I had known, my undergrad, I went to Carnegie Mellon University, a pretty techie school, and then I went to UM Law, and I really had no idea how law and technology really intersected at all. And when my 2 professors approached me with this project, and they were talking to me about programming, I thought they were out of their mind. Like, there's no way there could be programming in law school and stuff like that. Then I saw Jessica's presentation, and I was convinced that I had uncovered a new area of the law that's not really touched upon, I think, in other courses, especially their first year and second year courses. And of course, what went really well was having Jessica as her own 24/7 hotline, and Chris also helped a lot with the learning hot docs.
24/7? That's good. We're not paying you enough.
I know.
And then, of course, there were a few bumps in the road. Hot Docs and Access to Justice author, both were foreign technologies to myself and to everyone in our clinic. Most people also used Macs, so they were unable to do the Hot Docs portion So I think I was the only member of the group that owns Windows. So primarily handled that aspect of it.
And mainly because you just look white man.
Yeah, and so really learning, and I guess I've already stressed it, but I'll stress it a little bit more, kind of the onus of learning these two new technologies while you're handling your 18 hours of required clinical work plus your 2 or 3 classes that you have on the side. It's a tall task, but one that can be handled, I think, and one that was handled. And another thing was kind of a communication breakdown. I know there are easy ways to facilitate this, but when one student would work on their access to justice interview, it would be hard to then get that interview into everyone's hands. And I know the cloud is ideal for this, but a lot of students, despite themselves being tech savvy, aren't that familiar with the cloud yet. The first day I tried to set up like a Google Drive, and by the next week everyone had forgotten what a Google Drive was. So that was a bit difficult. And so is it worthwhile? I think it is. I think it's a great change of pace to the law school doldrums. I mean, I can't stress enough how halfway through my second year, I was already zombie-like and the day-to-day kind of interactions. And this was a great change up for that. And it really elucidates how technology is evolving into the law and in general. And I'm personally very excited for the future of the program. Miami, as Chicago, New York have large minority populations that are tremendously underserved. And this is, I can't think of a better way to kind of reach out to that community. So I will quickly. Oh.
Yeah, you might have to log in too. Or click through the.
There's always a tech problem.
Here we go.
Oh, okay.
We had it working on other non-PowerPoint working computer.
Yeah, the first panel I went to today, they were talking about what happens when technology fails and how to get faculty accustomed to that.
So what we're directing to now is the Law Help Interactive server. So part of what I did, it's kind of a new thing for our clinics. Students before would test assemble on their local machine during presentations, and it was clunky because you had to take an answer file from A2J, open it up in hot docs, it didn't always work, things didn't populate properly. So this past year, we started putting the final projects up on the national server. And so I have a developer account on the server, so I'm able to load them, and the students can then have a link to show in presentations, and a link that they can put into their resumes to show future employers and say, look what I made. And a link that'll stay up there. We've watermarked it so that hopefully end users aren't running into this and actually using it. It says student use only. There's a terms of service that William clicked through. But this is up on the national server right now.
Yeah, I saw that. And the demo was very useful when we were pitching it to legal services in Miami as well, and to the law school dean, so they could see how the end product looks. So here it is. Here's our more or less final product, and I think I only have like 2 minutes, so I might not. I'll just run through it as fast as possible. I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with access to justice. So these learn more bubbles kind of help explain tough legalese or just provide more syntax for the interview. And one of the things we struggled with was creating or not creating a legal attorney-client relationship. You can imagine there's a lot of legal issues that may arise for clients using the software, and perhaps the form not fulfilling their legal wishes. So these initial questions really just are just making sure that the client is able to use this software. In Florida, you have to be a Florida resident in order to file a preemie guardianship form, and you need to fill it out for yourself or for a minor child. You couldn't fill it out for a niece or nephew. Oh, of course.
What if they don't qualify? What does the software tell them?
Oh, I'm sorry. If they do not qualify for these particular questions, it'll just should tell them that they must be a Florida resident to use this. If they are not, they'll need to find services in the state where they live. And so they can immediately exit the interview, or if they made a mistake, perhaps click the wrong button, they can go back and re-answer the question.
Is it more available in alternate languages?
You can make it available in alternate languages. For Miami, we've gotten that question several times, and we're already beginning translation of it. The programming language that you kind of saw in Jessica's presentation stays the same. So it's really just an issue of strict translation to a different language.
In New York, for example, they use some of the pop-ups to have it in English, French, and Spanish. So it'll ask the question, and then it'll have like English, or it'll have Spanish as a blue underline word. You can click it if you want to see what that says in Spanish. Click the French to see it, and so that, say you were at a clinic or at a help desk, the primary, the person who knows the system may be speaking English, but then the end user may have Spanish or French as their primary language, and they can work together to complete the form.
It would support Chinese.
It does. It supports Mandarin and Cantonese. And our new system will have more availability for other languages.
It does do automatic translation, so no magic there. If you want the words in the interview to be in Spanish, then somebody has to figure what those are and create those. But the Chrome, the back and next and My Progress button, those have all been translated and built into it, and we're adding more languages.
So I'll just put in my information, and please continue to stop me if you have any questions. When you select gender, you'll see the user's avatar. Look accordingly. And of course, this is just, all our Learn More bubbles are strictly talking about the Florida statute that dictates the requirements for prenatal guardianship. So that's just hopefully an easy to understand language. And
I want to follow up on your question too. They could code in, if the person doesn't qualify, they can put a URL in there, so when it exits, it goes off to a website that says, here's where you can go search for more information, or, and we encourage that, because it's pretty common, right? You show up, you're in the wrong place, well, send them off to the right place. Interlink the interviews to the place where they can get the help they need.
We'll see.
And law help would probably be a pretty big target, for the law help website. It answers a lot of questions.
Yeah, if there's if you're in the wrong state, then what state are you from? Well, here's the right place to go.
So you
Audio, yeah. Clients coming in.
You can add in audio clips. They have to be recorded. So that's kind of a budgetary concern sometimes. And if you change the form, you then need to rechange the recording. That can be an issue, but you can have video and audio and graphics in your Learn More. You can have audio on the question, audio and pop-ups, all that. So everything can be for low literacy or low vision, blind, and need the audio prompts for it. That's all available.
And the files are stored. You stored the files?
They would all be stored in the A2J file that's then uploaded to the server. So there's nothing you don't need to have it locally on your machine. So, but real quick before William goes on, you can see here he put my name in as who do you want to be the guardian, and then in the next question asks what is Jessica's telephone. So he's using the information gathered from the end user to further customize the interview. So instead, this is particularly helpful, how many children do you have? I have 3 children, Bobby, Jane, and Joey, and then who's Joey's father? Who's Bobby's father? What's Jane's address? So you don't have to what's the first child? You don't have to say what's your first child's address? What is your second child's address? You can use the information they've given you to customize it.
That's particularly helpful in our context when they're talking about whether the guardian provides your child with medical services. You know exactly what relationship you're asking about. And again here, if I were to say that Jessica did not live in Florida, which is another requirement for guardians, it would ask a follow-up question: is she related by blood? If I were to say no, then it would say she cannot be her guardian, and she would have to choose a new one. And so as we go on, we define the legalese. We try to make it as general but helpful as possible. And again, if I were to click that she was convicted of a felony, then
I have a bad piece of work.
and these are all. Yeah. And so we gave them the option to appoint a secondary guardian in case their first guardian becomes unavailable for some reason. I'm going to put no, just to speed along the process. And then again, we finish the interview by asking them if their witnesses are present or if they know who is going to witness the document. They can input both their names and addresses onto the form, and we're gonna skip that and just skip ahead. So at the end now, it sends them to the Law Help Interactive website where they can download a PDF version of their form by clicking the Get Document. I believe it could also be emailed.
Yep, so they can save their answers, they can come back and fill it in later, or get their document later, or they can email it to themselves. So it just downloads.
So what just happened there when you hit submit was an XML file went up to LHI. LHI handed it off to the hot docs server there, and there was a template that they also had to create that he didn't show how, with an authoring system and hot docs. Put those two together, essentially a mail merge, generated the PDF, and then dumped it there for a click to retrieve that PDF. So an awful lot just happened in 2 seconds.
Yeah. But for the end user, it's a very simple process.
Yeah.
And so we decided to include kind of an instructional sheet as the first page that the end user sees, with 2 or 3 steps on how to actually file the form that they just produced. So sign where your name is, have the 2 witnesses witness it, who can be a witness, and then where they have to go to file it in the Miami probate court. And so here is the finished form. I should say that it's pretty vanilla in terms of there's no like check boxes or anything to fill out, but and I see some of it is still under works. But if I had put in the witness information, it would be there. There's a spot here for the notary, and I think it's a pretty nice end product that you receive from using the interview. So.
All right, so we'll just do a quick, Alex will give you a quick overview of where we're moving forward, and then we can take questions on the whole presentation.
Thank you, William, and thank you, Brian and Jessica, for your presentations. As Jessica mentioned earlier, my name is Alex Rabanal, and I work in our office at the Center for Access to Justice and Technology at Chicago-Kent. And I just want to briefly conclude with just a couple of quick notes about where this project is going. You've seen the excellent work product that's been generated in Brian and William's courses, and as a center, we want to encourage more of those types of courses, right? So we've just wrapped up round 1 of the project, right? And as Jessica mentioned, there were 6 schools included, and we also had the Justice and Technology Practicum at Chicago-Kent. And over the next several weeks, we're going to be, as a center, receiving feedback from the clinical course faculty. And what does that include? That includes things like the course descriptions, and all of these things are going to go into a course kit, which can be used by future A2J clinics. So we want to gather all of the great feedback from these courses, their course descriptions, course syllabi, teachers' notes, explaining what worked, what didn't work, what some of the students thought about the project, and then, of course, as William showed, examples of student work that's been produced in the courses. What's next for the project? Our goal is to expand the project from 6 schools to 12. with A2J clinic courses beginning in fall 2015. Requests for proposals should be going out sometime in mid-August, with a mid-November deadline for receiving those proposals. And sometime in December, early December, we'd like to make an announcement of schools accepted for the next round 2 of the project. So how can you learn more about it? Keep track of what's going on. You can visit our website at the Center for Access to Justice and Technology at I Teach Cal Kent. And also, you can follow us on Twitter. Our center manages the A2J author Twitter account, so you can always go there for up-to-date information. So we thank you for being part of our panel, and with the remaining time, we'd like to open up for any questions, which can be directed to any one of our panelists.
You talked a little bit about Mac compatibility issues, and I was wondering if anyone has tried doing some kind of virtual lab environment to bypass that.
Yeah, so actually so the question was about Mac compatibility and virtual labs. At the University of North Carolina, they use Citrix. They have the Citrix platform. We talked to them about, like our IT department talked to their IT department about implementing this on a larger scale, and it's expensive. So they already had Citrix at their school, but they did it. They had, I think, 15 students in their class, and it worked great when the students weren't all at the same time on the system. But when I would do virtual TA sessions with them, it crashed about 2 times during my sessions. So I was trying to do a go-to meeting and talk to them, being projected, and they were trying to access the software to work along with me on this virtual system. So it was a little bit difficult. But they did produce 9 different hot docs and A2J templates from their class. So.
Bookmark this. I'm in Vermont law. Talk to you later.
Okay.
We have a working system, not Citrix.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that would be awesome. And our new A2J Author 5.0 is not Flash-based. So it's HTML5 and JavaScript, so it'll be working online in the cloud. So that kind of solves that issue. HotDocs is still Windows-based. And we've talked with the HotDocs team, and they've given us no indication that they're interested in Macs, because law firms still use PCs, and that's their bread and butter. We do have a new grant from the another technology initiative grant to build document assembly capabilities into our new A2J Author 5.0 system. That grant runs from July of this year through 2016. So it's not an immediate solution, but we understand and we're working to kind of build those capabilities into our own system. Are there any other questions? No.
I just had a question for Brian, maybe William, about how the students get involved, or where they are in their clinical experience when they start building these forms. Do you have them go through the clinic and then create the forms, or is it...
Right, so we have teams of students. There are generally 2 students or maybe 3 students to a team. And we have working with A2J as one of the big features in one of those teams. And so the clinic sort of works on its own and does what it does. But as a part of one of their fieldwork projects, students will be learning how to work with A2J Author and HotDocs and that kind of thing. But it isn't a clinic-wide project for our clinic. I think that's not the case in yours, right?
Yeah. Well, we had the entire fall semester to do clinic non-A2J work. And so I think that helped us identify which form we needed most to kind of have automated. But in terms of, there was nothing integrating technology at all for the fall semester of our clinical program.
And at CUNY, they have another traditional elder law clinic. They did the whole 8 or 9 students that work in Joe Rosenberg's clinic, worked with clients, took their first guardianship cases to court, and then they started working on the software. But all of their students worked on one project. So each student can work on one project individually, or all the students can work together and get kind of more clinical experiences as well. John?
I wanted to add to that we say clinic a lot, we call this the A2J clinical project, but it doesn't have to be a situation where it's integrated into a clinic course. It could be any course. It seemed when we started this a couple years ago that the clinics would be a natural fit, but in some ways they're not, because they want to keep students in front of clients, not off doing projects in the nerd corner or something like that. You know,